Have you ever woken up to find something so outrageous happening right in your own backyard that you thought you were still dreaming? Imagine stepping outside only to realize your private space had been completely taken over by someone who didn't think they needed your permission. Before we dive into this wild story, make sure to hit that like button and subscribe for more unbelievable tales that will leave you speechless. And trust me, you won't want to miss how this one unfolds. I never imagined I'd wake up to the sound of splashing in my own backyard, especially since I hadn't invited anyone over. At first, I assumed it might be my kids waking up early and jumping into the water for a morning swim. But as I moved closer to the window, something about the noise felt off. The voices outside were unfamiliar, different from the usual sounds I heard from my family. There were too many of them, overlapping in excitement. And then there was laughter, a chorus of shrill, unfamiliar giggles. My stomach tightened. Curious, but uneasy, I pulled back the curtains and looked outside. What I saw made my blood run cold. A group of kids, at least a dozen, were leaping into my pool, splashing wildly, kicking up waves as they shrieked in excitement. Some were standing at the edge, dangling their legs in the water, while others were engaged in what looked like an impromptu race across the deep end. And the worst part? They weren't alone. There, standing on the pool deck with a whistle slung around her neck like some kind of coach, was Lisa, the neighbor from hell. For months, she had made my life miserable, constantly filing complaints about the most trivial things, from my trash cans being slightly out of line to my lawn growing half an inch too tall. But this was beyond anything she had done before. This wasn't just petty meddling. This was blatant trespassing. Lisa wasn't just using my pool. She was running a full-blown swim school in it. And based on the number of students splashing around, it wasn't the first time. How long had she been doing this? Had she been sneaking in while I was at work? While my family was away? The thought sent a chill down my spine. I had always known Lisa was pushy, but I had underestimated just how far she was willing to go. She was clad in an expensive swimsuit, her hair tucked beneath a stylish sun visor, barking out instructions like she was running an official class. I even spotted a few parents lounging on deck chairs, sipping drinks and chatting as if they had paid for a summer resort experience. I felt my pulse hammering in my ears. My yard, my pool, my property, being used without my permission, and none of them seemed to care. No one even looked guilty, as if they genuinely believed they had every right to be here. And Lisa? She was acting like she owned the place. This was a new level of audacity, and I wasn't going to let it slide. She was dressed in an expensive swimsuit, sunglasses perched on her nose, and a whistle hanging from her neck. But she wasn't just using my pool. She was running a full-blown, unauthorized swim class in it, as if my backyard had been converted into her personal business venue. My blood boiled. I stormed outside, my footsteps heavy against the pavement. If Lisa noticed, she didn't care. She continued shouting instructions, clapping her hands as she encouraged the children, completely unfazed by the fact that she had absolutely no right to be here. Some of the kids noticed me, hesitated mid-swim, but Lisa waved them off dismissively, telling them to keep practicing. The parents, seated comfortably in lounge chairs, barely batted an eye, too engrossed in their conversations. "Excuse me," I barked, my voice cutting through the morning air. "What the hell is going on here?" Lisa turned to face me with slow, exaggerated indifference, like I was an annoying customer at a store she had no patience for. She casually lifted her sunglasses, glanced me up and down, then sighed dramatically. "Oh, it's you," she said, as if I was the unwelcome guest in my own home. "What does it look like?" "I'm running my swim class." I blinked, waiting for her to realize how insane she sounded. But Lisa didn't look the least bit concerned. In fact, she gave me a self-satisfied smile, as if she was doing me a favor. "In my pool," I demanded, my voice rising with barely controlled anger. She scoffed. "It's a neighborhood pool." I let out a dry, humorless laugh. "No, it's not. It's mine. On my property." Lisa rolled her eyes, her tone growing more condescending. "Oh, don't be so dramatic. It's just a pool." I could feel my hands balling into fists at my sides. Just a pool? Did she seriously believe she could waltz into my backyard, take over my property, and act like I was the unreasonable one? The sheer arrogance of it made my blood boil. I took a slow breath, trying to keep my temper in check, but the condescending smirk on her face made it nearly impossible. And besides, The HOA has certain rights over neighborhood amenities. You can't just lock out the community from something that benefits everyone. It's not like you even use it all the time. Besides, these kids need a safe place to learn how to swim. You should be grateful I'm giving them that. I glanced around, and for the first time, I fully absorbed the scene. Not only were there at least a dozen kids splashing around in my pool, but a group of parents had made themselves right at home, seated in my backyard as if they had paid for this privilege. Some had set up coolers with drinks, others had taken over my lounge chairs. One woman had even propped her feet up on the small side table next to my patio furniture. My patience snapped. I took a deep breath, my fists clenching at my sides. "Get out, all of you," I commanded, my voice echoing through the yard. Some of the parents looked uncomfortable, shifting in their seats, their earlier enjoyment of the impromptu swim lesson fading. But Lisa? She remained entirely unfazed, shaking her head with an exaggerated sigh, as if I were a stubborn child refusing to share a toy. "You're being incredibly selfish," she said, folding her arms across her chest. I spoke with the HOA, and they agreed that shared resources should be used for the benefit of the community. You know, for people who actually care about fostering a sense of togetherness. I clenched my jaw, my fists tightening at my sides. "This is not a shared resource. This is my private property." Lisa smirked, undeterred. With a dramatic flourish, she reached into her bag and pulled out a crumpled piece of paper, handing it to me as though she was presenting undeniable proof. I snatched it from her grasp and skimmed over it. It was an HOA document, all right, but as I read through it, I quickly realized it was completely unrelated. It vaguely mentioned shared community amenities, like the park and clubhouse, but nowhere did it state that privately owned pools were fair game for public use. "This doesn't mean anything," I said, my voice laced with frustration, and I tossed the paper back at her. Lisa clicked her tongue in disappointment, shaking her head again as if I was the problem. "I knew you'd be difficult about this." Then, without missing a beat, she turned to the gathered parents, her voice adopting a sugary sweet tone. "See? This is exactly why we need to make sure everyone understands the rules. Some people just don't know how to be part of a community." One of the parents, now clearly uncomfortable, hurriedly grabbed their child's hand and mumbled an apology in my direction before making a quick exit. But the others? They just sat there, their eyes darting between me and Lisa, as if waiting to see how the showdown would unfold. I could feel my patience wearing thinner by the second. This was my home, my space, and I was done entertaining Lisa's delusions of authority. If she thought she could win this battle with a smug attitude and a meaningless HOA document, she was sorely mistaken. I pulled out my phone. "All right then, if you're not leaving, I'm calling the police." For the first time, Lisa's confident smirk wavered. Her eyes flickered toward the gathered parents, then back to me. But the hesitation lasted only a second. "Go ahead," she said, straightening her shoulders. "I have connections with the HOA board. They'll just tell the cops it's a misunderstanding, and you'll end up looking like the bad guy for refusing to let kids swim." I clenched my jaw. As much as I hated to admit it, she had a point. The HOA was corrupt, biased, and always siding with her. If I called the police, there was a chance they'd brush it off as a civil dispute and tell me to handle it with the HOA. I needed a different tactic. Instead of dialing, I turned on my camera and pointed it directly at her. "Since you have nothing to hide, I'm just going to record this for documentation purposes." Lisa's smirk faltered. She shifted her weight uncomfortably. "Oh, don't be ridiculous," she said, waving her hand dismissively. But I noticed how her voice wasn't as steady as before. I kept the camera rolling. "So just to clarify," I said, keeping my voice calm but firm, "you're admitting that you're using my pool without permission? That you invited all these people onto my private property without my consent?" Lisa hesitated. The parents, who had previously been content to ignore the situation, suddenly started looking uneasy. A few of them shifted in their seats, some even gathering their belongings as if they weren't so sure about their involvement anymore. One of the kids, shivering from the cool morning air, tugged on Lisa's arm. "Miss Lisa, it's kind of cold." Lisa forced a strained smile, her eyes darting toward me. "All right, class dismissed for today," she announced hastily, clapping her hands. "We'll continue tomorrow." I took a step forward. "No, you won't." She turned to me, a new defiance creeping back into her expression. "Oh, I absolutely will." unless you want to deal with some hefty HOA fines for denying access to a community resource. I met her gaze evenly. Try it. For a long second, we stared at each other, the tension between us stretching taut. But then, with a huff, Lisa turned on her heel and strutted off, her whistle bouncing against her chest. The remaining parents hurried to collect their kids, avoiding my gaze as they made a beeline for the exit. Lisa thought she had won, but she was about to find out just how wrong she was. That night, I sat in my living room, poring over every possible way to put an end to Lisa's entitled nonsense. The usual methods wouldn't work. I had already seen how the HOA operated, biased, corrupt, and completely in her pocket. The police? They'd just call it a civil matter and tell me to take it up with the HOA. If I wanted to send a message, it had to be something she couldn't ignore. Something that would make it undeniably clear that my pool was not public property. I tapped my fingers against the coffee table, my mind racing through scenarios. I could install a security system, already planned. I could file an official trespassing complaint, probably wouldn't stick. I could confront the HOA, but they'd just find some ridiculous loophole to twist the situation in Lisa's favor. Then, out of nowhere, a wild idea surfaced, curling into a smirk on my face as it took shape. Lisa wanted to use my pool so badly? Fine. She was going to get exactly what she asked for, just not in the way she expected. A plan formed in my mind, growing more outrageous by the second. If Lisa thought she could treat my backyard like a community pool, then I'd turn it into something no one would want to use. Something cold, inhospitable, and completely uninviting. A slow grin spread across my face as I grabbed my phone and started making calls. Tomorrow, I was going to turn my pool into the Arctic. And Lisa? She was about to get the shock of her life. The next morning, I woke up early, my plan already in motion. I had made a few calls the night before, and now, as the sun began rising, the first delivery truck pulled up outside my house. The driver stepped out, giving me a wary look as he opened the back of the truck. Inside were massive blocks of ice, far more than any sane person would ever order for a private pool. But I wasn't just any person. I was a man pushed to his limit by an entitled neighbor who thought she could take whatever she wanted. With the help of a few workers, I began unloading the ice into the pool. One by one, the enormous chunks crashed into the water, sending waves sloshing over the sides. The temperature dropped rapidly, turning the once inviting blue water into an ice-cold nightmare. Within minutes, steam rose from the surface as the warm morning air clashed with the freezing pool water. It was perfect. To make sure the message was clear, I also put up new, even larger private property and no trespassing signs around the perimeter. Just in case Lisa thought I was bluffing, I positioned my security cameras to capture every angle of my backyard. If she tried to pull any more stunts, I would have undeniable proof of her trespassing. Now, all that was left to do was wait. Right on schedule, Lisa arrived with her usual flock of students and parents in tow. She strutted into my backyard like she owned the place, not even glancing at the brand new signs. The parents settled into their usual spots, setting up their towels and chatting like it was just another day at the neighborhood pool. The kids, eager for their lesson, ran toward the water. And then the first child jumped in. The moment his skin hit the ice-cold water, he let out a scream that echoed through the entire neighborhood. At first, the parents barely reacted, brushing it off as playful exaggeration, until the second child jumped in and let out an equally piercing shriek. A ripple of confusion spread through the gathered adults. Their chatter halted, their heads turned toward the pool, and uneasy glances were exchanged. The murmurs grew louder as more kids recoiled, shivering and scrambling to escape the frigid water. Panic set in. Parents rushed forward, wrapping their children in towels, their faces shifting from confusion to anger as they began to question what had just happened. He thrashed wildly, scrambling to climb out of the freezing pool. Another child, assuming the first one was just being dramatic, leaped in after him, only to let out a shriek just as loud. Parents jumped to their feet, their carefree chatter replaced by panic. Lisa, looking confused, walked to the edge of the pool and dipped her toes in. The second she felt the freezing temperature, she yelped and stumbled back, nearly falling in herself. I stood on my porch, arms crossed, watching the chaos unfold with the satisfaction of a man who had just won the ultimate battle. Lisa spun toward me, her face red with frustration. What the hell did you do to the pool? I shrugged. Oh, just a little maintenance. Decided to test out a new cooling system. Ice baths are all the rage these days, you know. Lisa's jaw clenched, her fists tightening at her sides. This is sabotage. You did this on purpose. I tilted my head. It's my pool. I can do whatever I want with it. The gathered parents, now realizing what had happened, started murmuring among themselves. One of them, a mother wrapping a towel around her shivering daughter, turned to Lisa. Wait, you told us this was a community pool, but he's the owner? Lisa's confident facade cracked. I mean, it's still part of the neighborhood. Another father, now visibly annoyed, cut her off. Lisa, this guy just froze his own pool to keep people out. That doesn't sound like something a community pool owner would do. Were you lying to us? Lisa's eyes darted between me and the angry parents, her usual smug expression replaced by growing panic. She opened her mouth, trying to regain control of the situation, but it was too late. One by one, the parents started packing up their things, shaking their heads in frustration. Yeah, I'm not bringing my kid back here, one muttered as he ushered his son away. Others followed suit, the small crowd quickly dissipating. Lisa, now standing alone, turned back to me with fury burning in her eyes. You're going to regret this. Her voice was low, filled with an ominous edge that made it clear she wasn't done fighting. There was something unsettling about the way she lingered, her fingers twitching as if she was already scheming her next move. But I just smirked, knowing that whatever she planned, I was more than ready for it. I smirked. Am I? Because it looks like your little business just lost all its customers. She stood there, fists clenched, body trembling, not just from anger, but from the cold air still clinging to her damp toes. Then, with one final glare, she spun on her heel and stormed off, her whistle swinging uselessly around her neck. As the last of the parents disappeared down the street, I let out a deep breath, taking in the peaceful silence of my now empty backyard. No more screaming kids. No more uninvited guests. No more Lisa. I checked my security footage. Every moment had been captured. The screams, the confusion, the parents realizing they had been duped. A slow grin spread across my face. Lisa had finally been put in her place, and I had the evidence to make sure she never tried this again. Tomorrow, I'd be sharing that footage online. If Lisa thought today was bad, she hadn't seen anything yet. And I did. By the following morning, the video was uploaded, showing every detail of Lisa's entitled behavior, the chaos that ensued, and the stunned reactions of the parents as they realized they had been lied to. It didn't take long before the post started gaining traction. Neighbors shared it. Others from nearby communities chimed in with their own HOA horror stories, and soon, it reached the wider public. Comments flooded in, praising my creative solution and calling out Lisa's audacity. The backlash was swift. By the end of the day, Lisa had become the subject of neighborhood gossip, her once unwavering confidence cracking under the weight of embarrassment. The HOA, likely desperate to distance themselves from the growing controversy, sent out a formal notice announcing that Lisa was no longer permitted to conduct any community-related activities. While she had never held an official position within the HOA, she had long been one of their most vocal and influential members, often swaying decisions in her favor. Now, with public scrutiny at an all-time high, the board was eager to cut ties with her and salvage their reputation. It was a pathetic attempt at damage control, but it confirmed one thing: Lisa had lost. For days, she kept a low profile, barely stepping outside. But the damage was already done. The parents who once trusted her had cut ties, the HOA had washed their hands of her, and her reputation had crumbled beyond repair. Then, a week later, I heard the news from my neighbor, Margaret. She's selling her house, Margaret said with a knowing smirk. Packing up and leaving. Guess she couldn't handle the heat after all. I couldn't help but laugh. Lisa had spent months making my life miserable, and in the end, she had driven herself out of the neighborhood. The day the moving trucks arrived, I sat on my porch with a cold drink in hand, watching as Lisa's belongings were loaded up one by one. She stood by the curb, her arms crossed tightly over her chest, her face a mask of forced indifference. But the tension in her posture gave her away, her shoulders rigid, her jaw clenched as she avoided eye contact with the neighbors who had once been her allies. Every time the movers slammed the truck doors shut, she flinched, as if each sound was another nail in the coffin of her failed scheme. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't even glance in my direction. Instead, she climbed into her car, gripped the steering wheel so hard her knuckles turned white, and sped off without a second look back. As the last truck rolled away, I took a deep breath, letting the feeling of victory wash over me. My pool was mine again. My home was finally peaceful. And best of all, no one would ever dare try to pull a stunt like that again. She didn't say goodbye. She didn't even look in my direction. And honestly, that was fine by me. As the last truck rolled away, I took a deep breath, letting the feeling of victory wash over me. My pool was mine again. My home was finally peaceful. And best of all, no one would ever dare try to pull a stunt like that again. With a satisfied smile, I leaned back in my chair and stretched out, enjoying the tranquility of my backyard. The battle was over, and I had won. Lessons learned from this story. This story teaches us the importance of standing up for our personal rights and not letting entitled individuals take advantage of us. It's easy to ignore small infractions, but when someone continuously crosses boundaries, it's crucial to take action. The protagonist didn't just reclaim his space. He exposed the corruption and manipulation that had been happening behind the scenes, ensuring that no one else would suffer the same injustice. The meaningful message behind this story: respect and accountability are key to a healthy community. Lisa believed she could do whatever she wanted because she had the support of a biased system, but in the end, truth and persistence won. This story reminds us that people who abuse power will eventually face the consequences of their actions. If we stay firm, document the truth, and push back against wrongdoing, justice will prevail. Personal takeaway. For me, this story is not just about a pool. It's about the bigger picture of fairness and personal ownership. Too often, people with a sense of entitlement believe they can bend the rules for their own benefit, assuming others will stay silent. But when someone finally speaks up, it sends a message: boundaries matter, and no one is above the rules. If you enjoyed this story and want to hear more jaw-dropping tales like this, make sure to subscribe to Story Precious and turn on notifications. We bring you the most gripping, thought-provoking, and inspiring stories that will keep you coming back for more. Don't miss out. Hit that subscribe button now and be the first to watch our latest videos.